Good afternoon. Good afternoon to firstly to you, our audience, who's taken the time just to listen into our second of our discussions around local government. I'd like to thank you for taking the time and also for gracing us with your presence, for being here. We also want to thank our special guest today, who'll be giving us a discussion on, I think, the critical and sometimes under-discussed subject of what is the state of local government, particularly rural and non-metropolitan universities during and post-COVID. I think most discussions, as you probably would have seen leading up to local government, correctly focus on metropolitan, or what we term metro municipalities, but I think a lot of the service is done to rural and non-metropolitan metropolitan municipalities. Firstly, just want to start with giving a thanks to our partners in this, starting with obviously my home institution here, the Wits School of Governance, and also SELGA, and also the Wits Voice, the radio station, to say thank you so much for just helping us through this period and also planning around it. And also special thanks to Lorato, who really has brought all this together. And we're just hoping that more than anything else, yes, we've brought in, I think, a really great bunch of experts and academics who work on the subject of local government. But importantly, we also want to hear your voices. So please, don't be shy to put in your questions here on the platform, which is Zoom, but also not forgetting our audience on Facebook. We'll be taking note of both of these platforms. So please, if you have a question, don't feel shy, just throw it there in the chat function. And what we'll do after the opening is I'll be looking out for questions. If you want to be pointed towards any of our guests, please do so. The platform is yours. If I feel a question doesn't have quite a sense of direction, I'll pose it to who I think it needs to be posited to. So I think with that short introduction as to what we'll be doing today, I want to just introduce our guest for today, starting in the order which will be followed, starting with just to see if she's online, Professor Noluthando Matsiliza, who's a professor of public administration at the Walter Sisulu University. Prof, are you online and with us?
Thank you, Professor Poe. I'm online.
Thank you. Prof has over 25 years of experience in higher education. Her areas of expertise are particularly public policy, leadership, governance, and municipal management, which I think will be very important, and monitoring and evaluation. And also, she looks at developments in higher education. In 2018, she was the Women Research of the Year at the Durban University of Technology, which is very interesting because, Prof, I'm not sure if the other guest, Dr. Mohale, knows you've left. He was very surprised when he heard that you have jumped ship. But I think it's a loss for DUT, but it's a gain for Walter Sisulu. So, Prof, thank you for joining us. And our second guest in this order will be Mr. Gundo Maswime. Mr. Maswime, are you online?
Yes, good afternoon, Dr. Poe. I'm online.
Mr. Maswime has a rather interesting background. He has worked as a consultant engineer in rural KZN before joining local government sector, starting at the post of Deputy Director of Sanitation Services, and also all the way to projects and implementation, and also Deputy Financial Manager of Infrastructure. He's most notably worked for Midvaal Municipality and also Mfuleni Municipality. And he's also on the, I think, interesting journey of doing his PhD in civil engineering. And I think the title is Infrastructure Implementation Science for Local Government. He's a lecturer right now at the Department of Civil Engineering at what I will say is the other university, but because this is a formalized platform, I must say the University of Cape Town. Mr. Maswime, welcome.
Thanks, man. Thanks, Diki.
And then we go to Dr. Mohale. Dr. Mohale, are you with us? Dr. David Mohale?
I'm trying to, I'm with you. Good afternoon, Dr. Poe, and good afternoon to the panelists. Good afternoon to members of the audience.
Dr. Mohale, I was going to say, don't disappoint the youth by being the one who doesn't know how to use technology on this platform now. Dr. Mohale is a director of special projects in the Office of the Vice Chancellor at the Durban University of Technology. I think what makes him quite interesting is, apart from just being an academic, he's got his PhD and has a very interesting PhD, which looks at developmental local government. And his master's is also quite interesting because it looks at the issue which a lot of times has popped up, which I think he'll touch on, is the issue of Section 139. He used to work as a civil servant in local government of Free State. Dr. Mohale, I forget the name of the institution, but I think you will inform us. But I think more interestingly, he's been able to use his academic and his practitioner knowledge, and is now serving on the Municipal Demarcation Board, which he was installed in 2019 by President Cyril Ramaphosa. He is chairperson of the committee within the MDB, where he's looking at research and knowledge management. And Dr. Mohale, we welcome you.
Thank you very much, Dr. TK.
And I know you'd be very upset if I don't say welcome home, because he is a Vitsi. And I know he's a Vitsi because Dr. Mohale will always tell you he's a Vitsi. So welcome home.
Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to go back home.
And we now move to Ubab Sonabo. Are you with us, Re Sonabo? Re Sonabo, I think I got it right.
Almost about the minimum 5 years to pronounce that surname with both G and Q coming out quite clearly.
Yeah, no, us Tswana people, when it comes to going to the eastern part of South Africa, we're at a disadvantage when it comes to surnames, but I will keep on trying it because I think it's the right thing to do. Resu Nabo started his, I think I would say his long-term relationship with local government, starting all the way back in June 1996, where he joined the then Provincial Department of Local Government and Housing in the Eastern Cape. He himself has also worked as a private consultant looking into government affairs and services. He's also a Vitsi, and I think as much like you'll see runs through the audience, he's both has academic interests and also practitioner experience. His enjoyment of academia coincides with his love for governance, public policy, organizational development, and development planning. So Resonaba Gegek, welcome.
Thank you very much, Doc. Thank you very much. Good afternoon to the rest of the colleagues and participants.
All right, no, thank you for that. Just that opening. I think, look, I'll jump straight into it, starting with you, Professor Nolitando Matsirita. Just if you could just give us an overview, I think as you understand it, of just the state of rural and non-metropolitan universities, not universities, excuse me, municipalities as regards to finance. If you could just maybe give us that overview and just let the audience into what we're seeing.
Thank you, Doctor. Good afternoon, viewers. In the current state of local government, in the post-COVID, we have actually seen much more depreciation of local government revenue due to non-payment culture of taxpayers. And we have actually also observed that in the previous phase, especially in lockdown 5, most of taxpayers expanded in non-payment because of restrictions of COVID-19. COVID-19 also have impacted local municipalities socially and politically. Most of the people have lost their jobs, and also some of them, they depreciated in terms of income revenue, because some of the people who lost jobs were also breadwinners in their families. And also local government have got a tendency that we have seen that has been existing for a long time now, of corruption of municipal officials and also some office bearers that have been implicated in corruption, which have resulted in loss of trust by the public. And we have seen that also some revenues have been lost, and also municipalities are owing a lot of debt from their suppliers, and also they are actually loan providers. So that makes the state of local government to be critical at stage. Local government has been also labeled of lack of sufficient servants leadership that will be responsive to the needs of the communities. And some municipalities in rural areas have a long history of bad background of infrastructure, especially on water wells and also connection of electricity, which is a result to actually a loss of actually trust in the public and the abuse of public trust. And local government municipalities, especially in my area in Eastern Cape, local municipalities have a low revenue reserve because they've got less autonomy in terms of making decisions, financial decisions. They are more dependent on government revenues, government grants. That is actually the state of municipality at hand now. And we are seeing a loss of trust from the communities. As a result, some of them are now, have you seen, they are actually campaigning in the elections as independent, actually officers who want to be voted by the people. But most of the people, they have lost trust in the existing political system in South Africa. So leadership is at crisis now. We are at crossroads with local municipalities because stakes are high. There are lots of protests that are mushrooming, especially in lockdown level 1. That is our state at current. Thank you, Chair.
No, thank you very much, Prof, for just that overview. And maybe just to give listeners and viewers insight, we're very particular about the subject of saying, what does pre and post COVID look like? Because just taking on from the discussion earlier on, Prof Pandi Pile said something very important. He said, sometimes it would seem as though in government planning and in policy, people are working as though business is as usual, forgetting that this bigger crisis has been quite destructive. And local government is only now, I think, as Prof is putting it, starting to really calculate where we are. And I'm just hoping to also just get views on this platform from other people, just the understanding, because look, you might live in a metropolitan municipality, but in truth, many of us have got homes, and I'm sure we're now starting to see what the repercussions are. And I think one of the areas which going forward, and it's probably been a problem all along, but I think it just gives it's a very nice way to measure how things are, is just in the areas of engineering services and technical services, to just judge what the state is. And Mr. Masume, all the way there at UCT, if we could just maybe invite you into the discussion, just to give us an insight as to what are we looking at, when we speak about not engineering, I'll term it engineering and technical services in non-metro and rural municipalities.
Thank you, Dr. Boy. I think we must look at infrastructure from 2 perspectives. The first one is the fact that you have got capital expenditure and then you have maintenance expenditure. So the capital expenditure, we're looking at it as when you're building something for the first time to be used, or if you are doing a massive refurbishment of something that would have been at the end of its design life. So with capital expenditure, there's been a major disruption with COVID in the sense that most of the municipalities were no longer able to finish their capital budgets. So if you look at Gauteng, for example, I think all the non-metro municipalities, they might have been one, if there's any at all, that managed to spend on their municipal infrastructure grant. And I spoke to some of the executive directors and senior managers dealing with infrastructure. The sense that I got was the relief of knowing that if they are to be really asked why they didn't spend, this time around, they have an excuse of saying there was COVID. Yes, COVID compounded the situation, but even if there was no COVID, municipalities have generally battled to use their MIG allocation. So what that means is that there has to be a revisit of the framework within which some of these conditional grants are supposed to be spent, especially knowing that we have got such a huge backlog on maintenance, to find that the majority of municipalities are not actually able to use what has been allocated to them, when it's known very well that what has been allocated is much less than what they actually need. So people have explained it as capacity. I don't think it's so much a capacity issue, because if you think about it, we have never had local government with better qualified people than we have today in the history of this country from 1910. And by that, I mean, we have the highest number of engineers in South Africa today than we have had at any time in our history. So if we look at capacity per se, we might be missing the point. I think it's the framework within which local government infrastructure is supposed to be delivered. When on the maintenance side, most of the infrastructure in the country was barely maintained from 1976. And the reason for that was when the state became militarized, the budgets shifted to defense and policing. So that backlog has been with us all along. But when we went into the hard lockdown period, we lost almost a year there, where maintenance was had taken the backseat, which means now they are playing catch up, because the way maintenance is structured is you look at what is just about to collapse, then you say, before it reaches that point where it collapses, what can we do to prevent that collapse? So the fact that last year we were not able, and even the year before last year, we were really not able to go on with our maintenance program. It means most of the municipalities are playing catch up. But I think this is also an opportunity. COVID has also brought an opportunity for us we can look at it as a policy window to revise our approach to local government, starting with the allocation of funds through the Division of Revenue Act. Apparently, there's a very complex formula that is really based on the population size that allocates funds to the different municipalities. But in my opinion, if 27 years later, we have a more unequal society, and local government is really where things happen, I think it might just be that the formula we're using for equitable share is favoring the metros and the more populous municipalities, and thereby defeating the purpose by encouraging migration to urban areas, as opposed to urbanizing some of the rural and peri-urban areas that we could be focusing on. So I think academics need to help Treasury, because Treasury, from what I hear, they feel that the formula they are using is the best they can come up with. But if you look at the fact that a metro like City of Cape Town has got billions in surplus that has just really been invested, and then you've got municipalities like Turamera that does not even have a wastewater treatment plant in some of the relatively bigger settlement areas like Chilamba and so on. So I think we need to relook at that formula. And I think in conclusion, when we look at the impact of COVID, we must be able to differentiate what was really caused by COVID from what was not caused by COVID. There are certain endemic problems that have been associated with our local government space, especially in rural municipalities, that we can explain our way through COVID, but the truth is that they have been there all along. I think there's a need to start looking at a policy differentiation between urban areas and rural areas. This country has got very different typologies when you look at neighborhoods. And I feel that from my observation, the legislative framework and the compliance burden favors the metros, it favors the more populous municipalities that are more urbanized. it doesn't favor a rural municipality like Nkandla or Mtubatuba or so on. The reason for that is that they do not have the number of people employed to focus just on compliance. If you really tally who's doing real work in a metro and who's making sure compliance is achieved, you will find that there's a large number of employees who are really just there to make sure that there is compliance, and compliance with what? Compliance with what the Auditor General is looking for. So a rural municipality is competing with Cape Town with 100 staff members per department, per each department, just dealing with compliance. That really needs our attention. I will stop here for now. Thanks, Dr. Po.
Thank you very much, Mr. Masuman. And I actually just enjoyed what you had said about looking at DORA and saying, listen, maybe there is a time now to actually analyze these things, because and I love the way you said the legislative compliance. Some might call it, like you said, legislative burden. And maybe if really we are in policy, and I think everyone here is either a practitioner or a theorist in public policy, we'd all agree that if something is not working, we should not be shy to say, listen, what is the alternative? And I think it's good that you also laid the alternative. Dr. Mohale, returning to you, as those that might not know, you're quite a notable, I would say I was going to say social butterfly, but I'd rather say you have a very interesting, what I call a political and institutional analysis on matters, which you normally post on your Facebook, looking at issues of government and governance. And I think there's a point Mr. Masume touched on, and you in a lot of your work you also touch on, which is the differentiation between cause and effect. And if you maybe could just give us just your insights, from a governance perspective, as to how you see this issue, which is, I know we've had private discussions about, if you were to take away the city of Joburg, the city of eThekwini, you take away the city of Cape Town out of the formula, the economic formula of South Africa, if I'm not mistaken, you'll tell me if I'm wrong, we are taking about 70, if not 80% of the economy of South Africa. So I think it would be interesting, maybe from a governance perspective, as to, how did we get here, and what are you seeing in relation to rural and non-metro municipalities, just from a governance perspective?
Well, Dr. Poe, thank you very much. I would say that the previous speaker reflected on some pertinent points I was going to raise. Let me also indicate that I'm not sure if Professor Pillay is still here. Earlier on, I was part of the session, and by and large, I think I agree with 60–70% of important issues that he had raised. I don't think that as much as we are focusing on a particular category of municipalities, I would always say that it is important that we appreciate the context within which local government should be analyzed. And most analysis, in my humble opinion, miss the centrality of Chapter 3 of the Constitution, which is cooperative governance and intergovernmental relations. If you look at it, this will partly cover what the previous speaker mentions around the division of revenue, which many of us feel that is outdated. And the MEC Dow earlier on as well did indicate that one point that SALGA has been very insistent on that needs to be reviewed is how allocation between the three spheres of government is done. And I'm raising this deliberately because Section 154 and 155 of the Constitution, which is the chapter dedicated to local government, are also instructive in as far as deliberate cooperation between the three spheres of government are concerned, particularly in relation to the support that must be given to local government to perform its responsibility. So the first problem which we have when you take Section 152 of the Constitution, which spells out the 5 objects of local government, and I would want to summarize those to 2 main broad objectives. That on one hand, is democratic objective, on the other hand is your efficiency or development objectives. Pre-COVID, and that in any case will not change about any time soon, because we would have to change legislation. Smaller rural municipalities have one problem that is caused by the entire government's failure to transform the economy of this country. That if you look at census 2011, the community survey that was done, I think between 2015 and 2016, if you look at secondary cities, smaller municipalities, population in those areas is going down. The reason that goes down is because people are forced to move out of their areas into the cities because there is little or no economic activity at all. So what is the implication of that from democracy point of view? There is a formula that is gazetted by the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in consultation with SALGA that informs how Municipal Demarcation Board has to demarcate the wards. Now, if you go to one municipality in the Northern Cape, I'm talking one aspect, democracy. One problem which you would have there and which has often led to unfair criticism of councillors, you'll find that because of the formula that is used as a uniform approach throughout the country, one councillor in an area such as Northern Cape would be responsible for a ward as big as at least 70 to 80% of the size of Gauteng as a province. So what that means that in terms of councillor visibility and accessibility, which remember that the local government, amongst other things, must reinforce representative democracy through participatory democracy. Now, if you've got a councillor, one councillor being as responsible for such a vast space, that is just untenable. Of course, that councillor has to be supported by about 10 members of ward committee. Firstly, the problem will be around the logistics of meeting, let alone setting up the very structure of the ward committee. So that is problem number one, and that problem is created by the fact that in those areas there is less activity. I mean, there is less economic activity. Related to that, and this will relate to other aspects of capacity, because there are different kinds of capacities. That if the economy is not doing well, because employment is low, I'll give you just two examples. If you take Machabeng, which is in the Free State, in around 2016, they had about 410 residents there. Out of that number, just about 99,000 was employed, right? If you look at Polokwane, they had about 730,000 people. Just about 165,000 of that to the total population was working. So unemployment means one thing. It means that people are unable to pay for services, even if you were to enforce the implementation of the MPRA, which was designed to assist municipalities to raise revenue. But if the people are not working, it means people will not be in a position to pay for services. Now, what we know COVID has done, we know that State SA has been releasing regular quarterly surveys that focus on employment and employment. We know that the first direct implication of COVID-19 has been a high number of, an increasing number of job losses, which means that not only is the national government suffering with the decreased revenue base, because even businesses were also affected, but it also means that municipalities have also not been able to raise revenue, over and above the fact that systematically over the years, they've not been able to raise revenue. And this is the important point that the previous speaker is made, that we must be able to separate what has been able to be done and not be done as a result of COVID. So that problem will continue to be there. And for as long as a country through cooperative governance and IGR, and to an extent, this is the point that Professor Pillay raised earlier in the morning, that he's a skeptic of district development model. I agree with him. The problems of IGR over there have always been soft issues. It has not been the problem of policy confusion. It has not been the problem of lack of legislation that must support the implementation of that. Program after program have always spoken about IGR. From the report that was released by Vincent Mapai in 1996 until the latest presidency discussion document released in about 2015, we've always acknowledged problems of failure to implement IGR as envisaged in the Constitution, as envisaged in IGR Act of 2004-2005, if I'm not mistaken. So if the district development model is not going to address those soft issues, for instance, that when a meeting, an IDP forum is convened, you've got people from relevant sector departments in the province and national government that are able not only to listen, but to commit resources that will be able to fund a particular project. We might as well forget about IDPs, because IDPs have become wish lists precisely as a result of the inability of other spheres of government to commit resources in order to help municipalities to pursue the constitutional developmental goals that they should be pursuing. So that is a structural component of the problems we're faced with. Systematically, if you were to say to David, he must leave Durban and become a municipal manager somewhere in the rural area, you are creating problems for David, because there is no development in that area, number one. Number two, what Procter and Treasury got wrong around 2013, 2014 was to regulate or to impose capping of salaries that could be paid to municipal managers and Section 57 managers in smaller municipalities. So if you want to attract good skill and you are likely to get that good skill in a city, but you want to relocate it or migrate it to a smaller area, you would not compensate for the inconvenience that we are creating for this person. So David will not leave city of Durban to go work somewhere in Hluhluwe only to be paid 700,000, because firstly that he's likely not to even get an appropriate, a decent school for his children. Now you are inevitably denying the prospective recruitment of the skills that you need for smaller and rural municipalities because of the policy imposition that we have made, which does not benefit the municipalities in as far as recruitment of skills is concerned. Secondly, part of the problems we have had, and they will continue, which undermine accountability in this case, and this has got to do with the point of the formula that informs the demarcation that I raised earlier. We have had situations where in very small municipalities, the mayor would also double up as the speaker. Now, who is who there? Today I'm the speaker, today I'm the mayor. Who accounts to who? So that is the problem. The second problem, which I think is part of the conversation that we need to have moving forward, is that the Constitution vests both legislative and executive powers in one body, in council. Now, because of political power dynamics that often get transported from intra-party politics, council committees, such as MPEC and Section 8 committees that must play oversight over the role of executive, are not able to keep the mayor and his or her members of mayoral committee accountable in terms of what is happening, because in terms of hierarchy of power in the political party and within council itself is skewed. And obviously people have got to think about self-preservation all the time. That problem has been there, is well recorded, and it will continue post-COVID. To conclude, part of the issues, if you look at what white paper local government says, that as a municipality, one of the 4 developmental functions is to lead and coordinate various stakeholders. Now, the question of legitimacy is very important, and legitimacy has got 3 aspects in my view. Firstly, is about the processes, the rules of engagement. They must be acceptable to everybody. But secondly, is about institutional performance. It needs to be responsive to the mandate, and a number of municipalities in these areas are not. But thirdly, particularly as it relates to individual office bearers, mayor, speaker, and municipal manager, you need to be acceptable to stakeholders in as far as your knowledge, experience, skills, competencies are concerned. If we are going to engage the farmers in small rural areas and discuss MPRA, and you want them to pay, they need to be convinced that you understand what you are saying and what you are doing, failing which there might be disputes. Of course, the Act does cover the municipality in a sense that in an event that there's dispute, it does not mean that I must stop paying for services. But if you are to mobilize resources for investment and do a whole lot of other work that you need to do, people need to believe in your capabilities. And in a number of these smaller municipalities, stakeholders that must be engaged to facilitate an environment for investment and drive development. Many a times they do not have confidence that leadership there is doing what is supposed to be doing. They understand what they should be doing. To conclude, because you asked me a few minutes before this presentation to briefly reflect on Section 139 of the Constitution, which deals with placement of municipalities under administration. Firstly, it needs to be understood within the context of the Constitution being emphatic as far as the protection of the integrity of each sphere of government is concerned. So that must often be considered as the last resort. But again, I often feel that we would not even get to Section 139 if IGR was working. But because of persistent failure of IGR, we often have municipalities failing to do what they're supposed to be doing. And by the way, in my view, and I hope Salga can also speak to this, when I did my study around 2012, 2013, about 7 cases that I looked at were repeat cases, which speaks to the fact that interventions themselves may not be working, precisely because number one, you intervene, but processes in as far as if problems were financial, many times interventions don't take that into account. But secondly, it also matters who gets deployed in the municipality as an administrator. If you are just going to take David, who's not knowledgeable about the sector and many other related dynamics in the municipality, that person will just be there to draw income and will not be able to deliver. But thirdly, administrative interventions often miss the primacy of politics in an area. And many a times when we speak as academics, we tend to speak as if politics does not matter in government and in governance. And until we get to a point where all political parties understand their developmental duty and begin to act in a manner that is consistent to push and promote development, governance will always be the victim. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dr. Mahalen. Thank you for actually touching on the Section 139, because I think what is particularly important when we come back to you, probably let us know is, has it really it seems to only affect rural and non-metro municipalities. And just to maybe echo what you're saying, Themba Nxumalo actually makes I think it's a point you touched on. He says the main challenge in local government is the remuneration framework in local government. The grading regime and job evaluation is an impediment to acquisition and retention of skills. I think we will return to it, and I'll just ask that maybe you just read that question and we'll return to that. Oh, Babsunwabo, yeah, I know. Can we see you? I hope you're not running away, because it would seem as though Salga, no wonder you guys are always under pressure. I wonder what medical aid you use, because these issues, these DBMA. And yeah, no, I think maybe we'll just get your, not so much a response to what has been said, but because I think you can touch on that a bit later, but just what are you finding? Because I think you are one of the few institutions, I seem to remember when COVID hit last year, I used your paper, and one of the issues that came out was, COVID requires you to wash your hands after you enter your home and things like that. And we found in some municipalities, because water infrastructure had been so degraded, communities could not access water to do the basics of washing their hands when they came into their home to get away from this evil thing called COVID. And I think Salga had a paper on that. But just let me not put words in your mouth. If you could just give us, what are you finding in rural and non-metro municipalities around the issue? Where are we really on these issues?
Thanks, Dr. Po, and good afternoon to fellow panelists and participants. I think quite a lot of what one would have wanted to reflect on has indeed been covered. But perhaps to come closer to your question, it would be important for us to acknowledge first and foremost that we're dealing with a thoroughgoing national transformation, which on its own, even before the pandemic, had its serious and inherent weaknesses. Amongst them is what I would call the disjuncture between the intent and the actual practice. If you look at the white paper in terms of what local government was initially intended to contribute in terms of the thoroughgoing national transformation, clearly you can see the strategic importance of local government, both to improve the socio-economic well-being of the people, and indeed to ensure that the quality of democracy practically manifest at that level. So to a great extent, South Africans, when they imagine what government ought to contribute, the sphere that is at the receiving end is the local government sphere. Let alone the fact that the sphere that also becomes in the receiving end is that sphere of local government, insofar as matters that in their location in terms of position, provincial or national. So there is that very, very clear disjuncture between the intent and the actual practice itself. So very few South Africans know that local government receives 5.5% of the national figures, 257 municipalities, 5.5% of the national figures. It becomes 9%. You could push it to 9.5 when you add conditional grants. And we know the political economy of conditional grants, that in their nature, they are meant to limit the ability of a municipality to decide where such resources can be deployed in terms of priorities of a particular municipality. So there's that inherent contradiction in the system. So you're then dealing with an intent that clearly locates municipalities very, very strategically in terms of our transformation system, but the system that almost makes it practically impossible for municipalities to play that role. And I want to also argue that we seem to be a system that's reluctant to rely on lessons and experience. And just before the session started, we were talking about a municipality that recently got dissolved a few weeks before local government elections. What is that going to solve? Nobody knows. But then perhaps just to touch on the issue that Dr. Mohale was touching on, is that perhaps it would work better if we understood that the conception of Section 139 intervention in our system is not necessarily meant to be a one-sided process. And that's why there's a requirement for a municipality to take a council resolution to support the intervention itself, because the expectation, and I want to argue, the expectation that those who drafted our constitution may have had was that we would have deployed all resources that are available in terms of Section 154 support to provide support to a municipality, but all of that didn't work. And therefore the problem is either the council or the administration. But unfortunately, in both ways in which you can intervene, both Section 139(1)B or Section 139(1)C, you are actually not addressing all elements of limitations or institutional deficiencies in a municipality. So that's probably a debate on its own. The second issue that I thought would be important for us to reflect on, Doc, is we have failed to create a system nationally that is resilient enough, that clearly is driven by a shared vision. And that is why throughout the over 25 years of democratic local government, we have created an unhealthy space of individual views to manifest instead of a shared national vision that we consistently implement and ensure that we collectively review. You'll recall that President Mandela had what was called Presidential Project Task Team. There was Project Consolidate. There was Sienza Manje, Basics, and all of those. And more often than not, those are really driven by individuals that are at the helm of cooperative governance in the country. But then to try and come closer to the main issue that we probably want to reflect on is that how has COVID affected municipalities, and how is COVID likely to affect municipalities going forward? Perhaps, again, I would argue that we take a step back and look at a few elements that are important that we need to agree on if we are to properly understand the reality of municipalities. For over a decade, municipalities have faced several shocks, including the 2009 global financial and economic crisis. Municipalities have been grappling with the challenge of drought in several parts of the country, particularly the coastal parts of the country. And so COVID-19 is an additional layer in terms of multiple pandemics that the municipality, the government sector has had to grapple with. So the 2008 financial crisis seriously affected the global economic across the board, including South Africa. And so if a municipality's financial sustainability is dependent on the ability of households to afford to pay for services, so each individual who becomes unemployed, who gets retrenched, and the breadwinner that dies, a new RDP house that gets provided adds on the burden of municipalities. And that happens in the context where we are yet to appreciate the fact that the introduction of a wall-to-wall local government system in itself created a much bigger space for municipalities to impact compared to what was the situation before in terms of provision of services. Yet the economy has been on a systematic downward spiral. So that's what we're dealing with as the local government sector. So what happens then when a global pandemic like COVID-19 happens? Firstly, we take a decision that municipalities must, like all other sectors, contribute to some extent in terms of our response strategy to the pandemic. Among such interventions is municipalities may not cut services. Municipalities have to create space for people to survive in the context of the pandemic. So a traffic fine that you ought to have paid 2020 in January, you still are yet to pay. A license that you ought to have renewed, you have not renewed because there's been a consistent extension of the deadline to renew licenses. And it becomes worse for rural municipalities. Because one of the things that I would want to challenge the academia to start applying its mind on is how destructive are the white paper assumptions in terms of the ability of various geographical spaces that we've determined as municipalities to generate revenue. And I dare argue that we did not apply our mind. As a result, our disaggregation of the national fiscus, in my opinion, perpetuates the apartheid geography. So we've actually deepened deepened the fact that geography is political in South Africa. So if you stay in Lijala Putswa, if you stay in Great Kai in the Eastern Cape, or a very small municipality in the Northern Cape, you most likely have your plight or your future prefigured, unless you walk away from that space and join the millions that have succumbed to urbanization. So those are some of the challenges that we're dealing with. The second issue is that you are dealing with, which is another aspect that I think academia should really apply itself on. Just take a step back and go back to the norms and standards, the RDP norms and standards, and see how we have actually determined the amount of time you'll spend waiting for a bath to fill in order for you to wash, compared to somebody who's somewhere in a township in the village. Because the determination of the sizes of roads and pipes actually contributes enormously in terms of the challenges that we may not have anticipated. So many of the water leaks that we're experiencing are in the poor areas. So we are, in a way, in the manner in which we've packaged some of the interventions as part of our thoroughgoing national transformation, perpetuating economic dualism in terms of those that are relatively affluent and staying in socio-economic enclaves, and those that are scattered in various parts of the country, which in the apartheid times we call them labor reserves. So those are some of the issues that I think are actually worth pondering and deeply researching by the academia. So if you look at the per capita household income of those people who are in various categories of municipalities, category A and B4, you will see the disjuncture. You most likely will have a per capita household income that is sitting at something like 9,000 rands in the city of Cape Town and Johannesburg. And a per capita household that is sitting at 200 rands, or just a few hundred rands shy of 300 rands in Great Kai. And all of those municipalities are expected to contribute in terms of creating a municipality that is able to generate own revenue. So those are some of the fundamental questions that, in my opinion, that we may need to look at, and all of them are historical and are pre-COVID, but they have actually deepened with the pandemic that we are still grappling with as a country, and are most likely going to affect municipalities going forward. Ask yourselves a question. If I may ask you, Doc, what will you miss if the provincial government were to close shop next week? What does your household get from the provincial government? Maybe let me stop there with that question. Otherwise, there are quite a number of issues that, in my opinion, are inherently contradictory. Even at a political party level, you'll see that political party hierarchy actually determines who becomes deployed to the local government sector. So your top of the cream in a political party A will go to national parliament, legislature, and then those who remain may be deployed to local government. It becomes worse when you talk about the actual core that becomes ordinary councillors, who we expect to ensure that they exercise effective oversight over local government. Perhaps the solution lies in our ability to have a vision, and we stick to it, and therefore do not allow individuals to manifest. If we do so, when failures actually happen, we will be able to own up and work together and immediately stop what I call local government pessimism that seems to be deepening every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Sunaba. I think that was a very detailed and I think to the point, just analysis of it on the side of Salga. I think maybe as we go to just looking at questions and also just shorter inputs from our guests, I think we can probably all just agree, as one has tried to put it here into notes, that look, the financial state of municipalities, I think as Professor Nolitande touched on, is not separate from what happens in the macro economy. The micro does affect the macro. And what COVID has simply done is exacerbate what I think even Prof. Pandipila touched on, which is the huge state of unemployment. And, you know, municipalities feel it worse as it regards to the issues of rates and taxes. And I think Prof. Nolitande raised the issue of saying, at a face level, you'll see that there's non-payment. And, you know, you can just put that as a deficit. But then when you actually look at it in relation to what and how we got there, I think that there's a bigger problem to it. And then I think Mr. Masuime touched on the issue of saying, listen, after 2 decades or so, and I always keep reminding people and the people we teach that we're actually going to the 3 decades in the next 3 or so years. There's maybe a need to revisit some of the assumptions which were made by such instruments as DORA, which is the formula they use, a division of revenue, as it regards to rural and non-metro municipalities. And as it says, the need for clear research, and I always get very irritated when people say research, because sometimes they're thinking it's a long 3 to 4 year dissertation, but what is research is sometimes is what's very obvious, and being able to put it into words, as Gwenda puts it, to say, what do we understand by the division between urban and rural? Because if we simply just leave it at that, we're missing the point that people, it's not as though people in their droves say, I hate where I'm living and I want to go to city of Joburg or city of Cape Town all the time. It could just simply be the conditions on the ground mean people have to do that. And I think Dr. Mohale puts it quite nicely by saying, look, if you look at chapter 3, the issues of IGR, as it relates to DORA and other facets of it, is it not maybe time where we need to say, listen, clearly things are not working, and we just need to really revisit how do we get there? And I like the point he touched on, which is if you did geography, there was what's called push and pull factors. It was very rudimentary, but I think Dr. Mohale gave it a very good update by saying, if you are a professional who's based here in Gauteng or any or of the big metros, outside for the love of going home, because I think that's what many of us like to say, what would make you go back? Because you don't just go by yourself, you go with family. And maybe it speaks to the lack of, I think, what Resonabo touches on, which is the vision for non-metros. Because it's very easy to make the vision for a city of Joburg, a city of Ekurhuleni, or a city of eThekwini, because by virtue of numbers and the professionals that are there, the vision sort of becomes self-evident. Not to say it's done well in those institutions, but it becomes very self-evident, that what professionals want. And maybe Prof. Nolutando, it just then brings us to the bigger issue of saying, are there internationally other models we could follow? Here I'm thinking about, if you look at the German constitution as it relates to local government, or what they term federal states, that the German constitution is very clear that there should not be one dominant center of commerce, which is to say, as much as Frankfurt is the economic hub of Germany, it should not dominate other areas in the south of Germany. And what I think one of the great things the German constitution does, when I was there, is they really do try to, advance industry across and all around German, other federal states outside of Frankfurt and even outside of Berlin. I'm not saying they're doing it perfectly, but just to you, Professor Nolutando Matilita, just that question of how do we now think beyond the crisis which we have? Are David, Dr. Mohale, and Mr. Masume correct in saying maybe we need to revisit certain legislation? Just your thoughts on it, as in what do you think is needed? Because to me, it would seem as though there's an absence of a solution at the moment. The problems, I think, that have been well described, and I think some of the positions Mr. Masume and Dr. Mohale put forward, one might say, are quite unique in that they're actually looking at legislation as a source of solutions. But I just want to get your thoughts, Professor Nolutando. What can be done to plug this gap?
Thank you, Dr. Poe. I might go back to one of my publications and repeat myself by saying that we need to review our model of decentralization of structures of local government. In our constitution, we have stated very clearly that we want to promote a devolution of power, but there is a problem with power sharing. The division of revenue, it speaks to that, because you see that there's a lot of concentration of revenue in metropolitans, and people are migrating to metropolitans, leaving the strategies which, like rural development strategy, not implemented well because with lack of capacity and so on, and revenue. So that issue of decentralization, if it's working to a very minimal level. And secondly, looking at actually power sharing between local government, especially on district and rural municipalities, and also provincial governments. There's a lot of concentration of power within provinces and less autonomy on local government. That makes it actually a problem in terms of implementation of strategies and implementation of policies. And I will go back to what also David proposed in his thesis, I think also to look at actually the issue of revenue collection in local government is very critical. I know other issues like relating to deepening democracy and public participation are also very important, but the issue of revenue collection is very important in local municipalities. Those municipalities that cannot collect revenue, that depend on set-aside grants, they must create projects and programs which are part of rural development to enhance rural development economy within those areas, so that people, they don't have to move from Cape Town, from Queenstown to Cape Town, or from Mthatha to Cape Town. They retain actually their nationality, and also their priorities are implemented very well in their own provinces when they actually are part and parcel of rural development strategies. And those projects and programs must actually also be funded, but create a culture of self-reliance. They must tap on the capacity and the skills of people living in those rural communities, tap on them, and they must give back the land to the people, because the rural development strategy, it indicates very well that there must be some project on agrarian development and so on. But people, they don't have land to implement those strategies. It's very important that government answer the questions of the land very quickly, because we have come now at crossroads where people, they need more land, and if this continue being unresolved, there will be chaos, and there's already leadership crisis in local government. Thank you, colleagues. That's all I can say. I don't want to say more in terms of moving forward.
No, thank you, Prof. Thank you for that. Mr. Maswima, I think Prof touched briefly on it, but I think Nathi Ntantala really also kind of heightens a bit when, and I'm assuming whether it's he or she, it says the main challenge with municipalities is, I think, going to say the housing sector, and I love the way they frame it. It says the ignorance of infrastructure. They focus only on building houses. How can you build a house in an environment where we're using geotechnical reports from 30 years ago, not retaining walls? And I think Unati goes on to say that then it becomes almost like a reoccurring problem, where because you didn't update the geotechnical reports, or because you've only focused on housing, but you've not really done updated reports, when issues or seismic problems happen, now you start to be in the cycle of repeating, repairing. And maybe I'll just maybe posit the question that Prof also put on the, just, I like the way you say, I say infrastructure, but you say, I think you use a different terminology, and I'm trying to be politically correct as I say this, is, do you think we've, a government, and I have to say we, because sometimes we like blaming, but we also sometimes forget, we also vote for these people. Do you think the issue of land in infrastructural development has really been properly thought of? As in, I know there's discussions now about a smart city, but where's the questions about a rural, as you said, a rural first world, rural world-class municipality? Do you think we're actually linking the proper things together, or is it that we seem to jump to, say, infrastructure, housing, we skip, and then we just basically get into a cycle of saying RDP to sort everything out? Sorry for the long-winded question, but I think you do get my gist.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Po. Let me address the issue of geotechnical reports. A geotechnical report that was done 30 years ago, it will still suffice today. What you need to do is just the normal reconnaissance. You go and you walk the place and look at what changes have actually happened. But there's a principle in geotechnical engineering called virgin compression, which means the soil that was able to carry a certain weight sometime in its history will always be able to carry that weight going forward, even if the soil on top of it was removed. But the soil that remains will carry the weight that it once carried before. So that is not so much of a problem. And I think also answering the issue of design of infrastructure. South Africa has got very good engineers. They also have very good policies. The challenge is in implementation. And if we start from implementation and look at what are the challenges that we are confronted with when we do the implementation, reading the framework itself, you will be very impressed. Very difficult, even where we criticize, like Dr. Mohale was highlighting some of the weaknesses. You will hardly find something you can criticize for which you can come up with a better replacement. You look at it like we are criticizing the formula, for example, for DORA. It's if once it's explained why they arrived at that formula, it's only when you have the advantage of hindsight like we have now, because let's face it, in 1994, the people that put the legislation that governs infrastructure today, there were hardly any engineers in the room. The reason was that the engineers that were in the country at the time were not trusted with that responsibility. So there was a way of having them outside the room, so this can be put together. So right now we have that advantage of hindsight, and I think we are at a stage where we must stop the incremental changes and look at the rational changes, if I have to borrow from Charles Lindblom, that we have been tweaking and tweaking and tweaking what needs to be overhauled. And we need that boldness to go back and say, as Prof just said now, people don't have land, and we have got a rural development strategy that cannot be implemented because it depends on availability of land. Because you cannot do any agrarian reforms when people don't have land. So in that case, let people get the land, and let us go and implement the rural development strategy. Because where you put money, people will go there. So we are putting money in metros, and people are going to the metros and creating more money there, and it's turning everything upside down. The issue of housing, some of it, hardly any rural municipality has got the legislative mandate to build houses. It's normally done by the provincial government, Department of Human Settlements, or it's done, the license is given to metros. So outside the metros, I don't think even district municipalities have got that legislative mandate. Now, the Department of Human Settlement had anticipated when Mr. Tokyo Skhwale became Minister of Human Settlements, then they had observed that building houses without infrastructure is a futile exercise. So the department was pulled together with infrastructure, and it was human settlements with water put together. And that did not work out quite well, and they've now separated it again. What was actually needed was a robust intergovernmental, not a framework, but a real interaction. If human settlement wants to come and build houses in a piece of land, the local government must be informed and start preparing the roads, the reticulation network for water, sanitation, and electricity. And then only then the houses can be built, or concurrently, with a solid timetable. Now, we have got an IGR framework that is also impacted by an IDP process. So a municipality will decide human settlement wants to do these houses here, and we need to now develop this area, build roads and all the infrastructure to support it. But when you do the IDP consultations, the community does not prioritize that because they don't even live there. They are not interested. They are interested in the challenges they are facing now. So you will find that at the end, if you don't have a shrewd political leadership that is able to give people what they might need and convince them that they need to let certain development priorities get a chance, it doesn't happen. So that's the problem with infrastructure. Even where there are engineers, sometimes engineers are overruled by what the community wants. And then you realize that the engineers want to do what they want to do because they can foresee the disaster that's about to happen. Communities are not interested in underground infrastructure, for example, unless storage comes up to the surface. Then it's a problem for them. Or when they open the tap, there's no water. But they are not going to say maintain the underground infrastructure proactively. So you have that legislative, I think somebody called it a contradiction, where the community wants something else, the technical people want another thing, and legislation has made it in such a way that it requires a very solid leadership. But even in that leadership, that mayor is appointed by the community. So he has to choose, is he going to listen to the engineer? Is he going to listen to the community? The engineer he has employed, the community has employed him. So I have seen many cases, there's always there's always that dynamic, which just really requires somebody who's able to bring everyone together. So I think we're at the right time to go back to where we were in 1994 and say, let's try and do it again. That will be the rational change that we are looking at, but it requires a certain level of boldness, because in my view, the RDP program is more relevant now than it was back then. If we can go and remount the RDP program, we've got enough engineers now. We have got the highest unemployment rate that is higher than what we had in 1994. So I think the stars are aligned for us to go back to a radical program like that, which worked quite well to an extent. And it might be now that we need to dust off such programs and do them again, because I've heard Mr. Kanya referring to it earlier, that some of the programs, that intervention programs that have been made for local government and so on, like Senza Manje and so on, we need to start reflecting back on them. Most of them were just not evaluated properly because they were not strong partners to do that kind of work. But it might be now that we need to go back. Let's just call them with a different name and let them not come from individuals in government. Let them come as government programs that are not associated with individuals. Thanks, I'll stop there for now.
Thanks, Mr. Gunda. I won't forget that line. The mayor has to make a choice between the engineer who he employed or the community that employed him. I will not forget that one. Dr. Mohal, if we can have a quick back and forth. You are known as a developmental state scholar of note. And I want to ask maybe a series of questions in a quick round fire manner, if you don't mind me asking you in this way.
Let's see if I will survive the attack.
No, not at all, not at all. Northern Cape, Northern and rural Western Cape, Northwest Province, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, Free State. Ignore Gauteng and ignore parts of the metropolitan municipalities. Can you really have a developmental local government with some of with these provinces? I'm here speaking more about the municipalities in them, because I know your dissertation. And I'll try I was trying to find the URL link for it via UNISA. But is it not maybe time we actually just really became very honest and say, with some of these rural and non-metro municipalities, can they honestly be developmental local government, or do we need new thinking on this?
Let me say that for me, the starting point will be to address the deep-rooted intellectual dishonesty that is prevalent in this country. I've heard a number of your colleagues talking about the so-called depoliticized public service. I don't know where that exists in the world. We know South Africa today, as is with its 9 constituent provinces, is the result of what we have started in 1400s. Then, even though our history, for some reason of curiosity, people want to say it started in 1652. We know what happened in 1910, when only whites only came together and decided who takes what share of the pound. And here we come 27 years after 1994, we say that let us depoliticize public service. Yet, interestingly and scientifically, the very nature of public policies that must resolve the politics and the economy of the country. And I don't think it is as a result of that there are important considerations that were made previously, but they were ignored because of political expediency. The issue of rationalization of provinces has been mooted. It has been left hanging. In 2007, leading to the Polokwane conference of the ANC, and in the immediate aftermath of that conference, there was a talk about rethinking local government. That has not yet happened. And the question I've been asking politicians that I get to talk to on the basis of my other past life, I've always asked them one question: why do you keep going to China? And I'm trying to answer your question. I am told that when you get to China as an investor, they will direct you where to go and invest. And they will ensure that they direct you to areas that have got no infrastructure. And then they give you the lease of the land for whatever period you think you want. They know that at some point you will die and they will take over the land. But at the time the state takes over the land, that there will have been development of that area. There will have been infrastructure placed. And a part of the problem we have in this country is the fact that my understanding of the concept of developmental state is that the state has to lead all other social classes, even though it remains embedded within it. But in this instance, you have got the business that tells the state what to do, not the other way around. And I think that is the primary failure of, or the beginning of the problem we have in this country. Once the state has got both legitimacy and capacity to direct other stakeholders, I'm sure it should be very easy for us to say, look, we welcome everybody to come and invest in the country, but we have got Northern Cape. The fact that, as I said earlier, that you would have, between Kimberley and Kuruman, there is no filling station, or there is only one. And I think I'm talking about, if I'm not mistaken, at no less than 300 kilometers. That's a cause for concern. So you would need state, not necessarily provincial government on its own, but at a very national level, we need to have a sense of the kind of development that we want for this country. And quite honestly, I do not think that we are there as a country. Once we get the sense of development that we want, it would be then very easy to say, how do we rethink and redefine the role of local government? Part of the issues that, and I think Sonaba touched this briefly, is that, do we really need provinces? I would say rather reinforce district municipalities so that they can play a supportive role and do away with provinces. It could be that we may need smaller provinces, I suppose. Gauteng and KZN, over both of them each have over 10 million people. Why do you need Northern Cape and Free State and what else, Northwest, with under 4 million people per province? That is one. Two, one of the issues which we have not resolved and should be part of revisiting the entire thinking on local government is that we have not resolved the question of the architecture of local government in this country. And it is precisely for that reason that even when every 5 years we say we want to demarcate, nobody from ANC to government and other political parties can tell you confidently what is it that we are demarcating for, except for to say, okay, TK will be responsible for from that ward to that ward. Because what the risk that you are then running is that unless you resolve fundamentals, and the fundamental in every nation is the economy, whether you discuss land or any other thing, you need to resolve that problem. All other issues stem from how the economy performs. If the economy does not benefit the citizens, I can tell you we can demarcate every week. There will not be any material significance in as far as governance efficiencies are concerned, because that demarcation is just done for academic purpose, because constitution and legislation says we need to demarcate. But we will be missing the very driver of humanity, which is people must eat, must drink, must have shelter, must have the means to have clothes so that they cover their body. And that is the economy, not these big concepts that we often use and confuse people. That is what we need to take care of. I don't know that that was a very long answer, but I do think that the problem that we have, all of us as a country, is exactly what I call intellectual laziness, and which affects academia as well. That we think that what works and comes from the West will work here, and that is not the case. I think if there's any learning that needs to happen, is the learning that you have seen happen in East Asia, that they've tried to build their own model, and China is doing it. I'm not advocating that we need to be undemocratic, but I am saying let us have the model that will work for us. I've seen very nice concepts coming up, Gauteng city region, smart city. Before we talk beautiful English, let us address issues that will improve the quality of life of an old woman who resides somewhere in Bizana.
No, Dr. Man. I think what you're saying also resonates with what Elias Silo said. Is that government needs to reconsider its one-size-fits-all approach. And I'm not sure if we're at the same meeting, but the one thing I remember Chinese technocrats explained is people have this wrong conception of a developmental state as one which is rigid. But if you speak to Chinese technocrats, what they tell you is it's experimentation and putting it into the system. And I think Gundo, you touched on that. And having a feedback loop. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, we change it. But it would seem, and maybe Resonabo, alongside David in this, is I'm going to throw it out there. And I know I'm not married to the idea of democracy. I'm more married to development. I'm not really concerned how it comes about. But is there not maybe a question to consider? And I think Gundo, you touched on it, is the we have and I know people always say this, and I always want to, as a scientist, I always want to get, what is the measurement when people say a constitution is the best? Because scientifically, if you say something, and I'll use a football analogy, because for those that don't know, Dr. Mohale used to be a Laduma, the soccer newspaper. He used to be a reporter for Laduma. In football nowadays, if you speak of best in science, you speak about a system which has, sometimes it's a false nine, but it's quick transition football. That's what is scientifically known now, where you evaluate and you take away space and time. And the great football teams, the good ones, are able to manipulate space and time. See, that's scientific. It's something even in football you can institute. It's no longer about having a big dominating two central defenders. If anything, you go for a big and a small one. One only needs to look at if you look at how the French national team works, how even sometimes the Italian national team works, it's a playmaker with a dominant player. It's scientific. You can see it. In the economy, even though economics is a very shaky science, but there's certain things which they do get right. So Mr. Swanabo, Gundo, and even Dr. Mohale, and also Prof. Nolitando, you've spoken around the issues, but none of you seem to want to tackle the issue of asking, this constitution we praise so much, and Gundo, you said it maybe closer than anyone else. Is that not maybe the inhibitor in, I think Dr. Mohale always says, is in the imagination of policy? Are we being stifled by our constitution as it relates to this concept of a developmental local government? And I leave it to any of you to have the discussion among yourselves.
Let me perhaps start with the issue that Gundo raised, and I think it's one of the issues we have to disabuse ourselves from as South Africans, that we have got good policies, but there is no implementation. I think the simplest definition of a policy, that is a statement of intent. Now, how do we measure that an intent is good? And I'm saying at least a 101 introduction book on public policy identifies stages of what is meant by public policy. And the two last stages of public policy, as far as phases are concerned, is implementation and evaluation, upon which you decide whether you want to terminate policy or you want to continue with it. And I would want to challenge Gundo and differ with him that until we get to the point where we implement, I don't think that we need to disabuse ourselves from that tendency of saying that we have got good policies, but we lack there and there. Policy includes implementation and the results. If there are no results, if there's this growing mismatch between the actual results and the intention, which cannot be seen until it's manifested in practice, we cannot really say that because we have written policies in the clearest, understandable language. Therefore, they are good. And I don't think that is one of the issues which we have to disabuse ourselves from. Look, I think Constitution is there to provide a broad framework in terms of what we need to do. As a result, there are a number of legislations which have been developed. I think the last time when ANC went for its National General Council in 2015, it acknowledged that by that time they had surpassed 1,100 of new legislation, right? So one would say that in as far as institutional transformation is concerned, perhaps that good progress was being done. And legislation is there to say this is what we want to do, this is what must not happen. And in a culture where, in a climate where we are not even certain how we got to become such an unaccountable country, I don't think that both the Constitution and legislations play important role in as far as that is concerned. Otherwise, we would wake up tomorrow, we'll be told that National Treasury has nothing, and nobody will want to take responsibility as to what would have happened to the public purse. And so, for my view, I don't think that Constitution and legislation plays that important part. Yes, policy by its nature will be contradictory, in a sense that the Constitution emphasizes the mutual coexistence of these three spheres of government at the same time, and understandably and correctly so. It elevates certain importance to national government because it has got a moral duty to protect the sovereignty of the country. However, what it does need to change. Firstly, that assumptions made in the white paper on local government, as far as financing is concerned, now we know that is not possible. It is easier for metros to raise revenue on their own. It is not for secondary city municipalities. It is not for rural municipalities. So that would mean that we'll have to rethink some of these assumptions. That may mean that, yes, MFME may have to change. That may mean that the way a division of revenue has been done over the years definitely needs to change. And part of that is exactly what the question that Sonobo raised. And I do know that TK, you will have provinces, but if tomorrow we were to say that, let's do away with all these 9 provinces, what are we going to lose? And I can tell you, if we were to do a quick sample of 50 citizens across the board, what would be of interest to them, irrespective of any other physical distinction, is whether if they go to the tap, a clean water comes. When they go to the switch, the light comes on. That when they've put plastic bags in front of their gates, that there will be collection of refuse. For me, that's what an ordinary citizen cares about. The fact that you and I may want to go to Cuba and have other activities, that does not even fall anywhere in the hierarchy of basic needs. So this is what our people do. Now, if the Constitution says we are positioning local government as a fulcrum of development, make sure that you resource this sphere of government so that it is enabled to deliver on what is expected. But you cannot say, make sure that there is clean water, make sure that people have got access to sanitation, make sure that lights are on, make sure that roads are maintained, make sure that stormwater channels are maintained, make sure that refuse is collected. But you give, the last time I thought it was 9%, so now says it's 6 around 6%. It is just impossible to do that. So we need to get that kind of thinking correct. And that requires a new paradigm of development across the board. It needs the entirety of government. It cannot be solved by local government alone. Once we do that, that will be corrected. My last possibly departing point. The former presidents of Nigeria and Liberia, I don't know how genuine they were. They say in a book, if they had an opportunity, they have had an opportunity before to choose between presidents and mayors. They claim that they would have chosen to be mayors because they only get to understand the importance of local government after their terms of offices as presidents had expired. And it goes to the point I raised, and Sonabo also raised, that part of the problem we have is that if you are serious about local government as a political party, Take your best to that sphere of government, because that's where development is. That's where all of us would be saying, we need to make this sphere of government work. But everybody who thinks they are smart and senior in all political parties, they want to go to Cape Town because I'm told that there is free wine available for members of parliament. And whoever is left in the organization then gets sent as the speaker, as the mayor. Go and meet a number of mayors in this secondary cities and rural areas and ask them one fundamental question. What are the economic drivers in your area? Many of them do not know what you're talking about. Yet that person is expected to champion the development in the area by being the champion of IDP, which must inform budgeting, etc., etc. So to conclude, my argument is that we need the left-hand side to work with the right-hand side. Now, the three spheres of government must work together, and part of concessions which I think need to be made, drawing from all the lessons which we have observed since 1994, is that, let's be honest, colleagues, provincial government is not assisting much. Rather, if you want to retain district government, that is if we resolve what is currently lacking, which is the architecture of local government, empower that level of local government. And of course, it could be that some municipalities, district municipalities may not be in a position to assist other local municipalities based on variations. And it is important that we appreciate the dynamics within each and every local municipality. Once that is sorted out, I do think that we'll be able to move forward. In any case, I don't think that the constitution is a problem. I think the problem we have is the soft issues which we need to deal with as humans. And I do think that the problem we have is that our paradigm of development is not there, or if it exists, it is skewed. Thank you.
No, thank you, Dr. Mahal. Freestata, but how famous to microphone, you'll never get it back, Mare. I think you've given it back. Ramaswamy, I think Dr. Mohale was challenging you to say policy is intention. So
yes, no, he said policy is intention, and then he says it's not intention, it's also implementation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so my understanding of policy cycle is the Harold Laswell policy cycle, which starts with problem definition. And the problems were defined very well in lots of government documents. I will leave it specifically to infrastructure, or where it pertains to local government. Then the second stage is agenda setting, which means to get the buy-in of the nation in terms of the appropriateness of the policies that was received. Then the third stage is the policy development, which involved the green papers, the white papers. Some of them were referred to here even by Dr. Mohale himself, and positively so. He was referring to them as being very constructive. Now, the next step, that is called implementation. I stopped there because we can't say a policy is only good after it has been implemented. But the implementation is a science, and it's got sub-disciplines within it, like dissemination and so on, which is why Bob Gang has referred to some of the interventions that have been seen before that took the form of implementation. We have a problem of implementation of our policies, and I can vouch that they are good policies, and there are also other scholars that agree with me on that. In fact, my whole PhD work is on implementation. The reason for that is you will realize you will struggle to criticize the policies themselves. We can discuss, as we have, the structures as we talk about the architecture of local government. But the policies, if policy is really a statement of intent, I find them to be very, very impressive. And I'm not talking about the Constitution. The Constitution is really the framework within which the policies were developed. And the praising of the Constitution has come from outside first, before it came from inside, and it has really come from very specific quarters outside the country, which of course made all of us suspicious. But after 27 years and seeing the level of inequality and realizing that some of it can be traced back to some of the private property clauses that are in the Constitution, you then understand why the Constitution is very good. So something can be good maybe for other people and might not necessarily be good for ourselves. I think we have a challenge when it comes to implementing our policies, the fourth stage, to the point that we even jumped and went to monitoring and evaluation. We seem to do all these things and go straight to monitoring and evaluation. And you realize, just think about in the presidency, both yourself, Dr. Boy and Dr. Mohale, have drafted the framework, the policy framework that is being used. I saw that your names were also acknowledged there. In that framework, you concede that initially the implementation was fine. There were green papers, there were white papers, and then there will be a follow through, and there was a coordination in the presidency. And then in that document, it also clearly says that from around 2000 and from the time President Zuma came in, that office became the Office of Monitoring and Evaluation, and Minister Collins Chabane was responsible for the office. And in that document, it then concedes again that the attention to implementation was compromised. There was emphasis on policy evaluation. So the irony is that it's coming from Dr. Mohale, who is an author of that document, that after I did my work elsewhere, I arrived at that conclusion and felt so vindicated when I saw the document confirming that we have got a problem of implementation. So I wouldn't say we have bad policies. Bad policies means our intention would have been wrong in itself. So that I'm just clearing, that part. Thanks.
No, thanks, Gunda. I think Dr. Malo will have a retort. But Professor Nolutando, I think there's a salient point. Don't worry, Mr. Resonabu, we're coming to you. Professor Nolutando, I think there's a salient point which is being stated, but I think Dr. Mohale was more forthright in saying it by asking the question, and I think we should not be shy to answer it, is, are institutions of higher learning playing a constructive role in the theorization of rural and non-metropolitan municipalities, firstly? And secondly, are we able to give a different vision for them? Because I think he makes a point, and I think we do have to concede that sometimes academia, it's great at criticizing government, and let's be forthright, the ANC government, but it's very slow to produce the type of results to challenge it on what academia is supposed to stand on, the science of solutions. So just maybe your point on that. Do you think higher institutions, let's be more specific, especially schools of government or governance and programs like public administration, are we honestly an aid? Or are we also part of the problem?
Thank you, Chair. I think we're not playing an honest role. We are not being activated by the same government, in the sense that when we invite them into our forums, in our conference for governance and public administration, they seldom come. They send representatives on their behalf to listen to our research and our findings for advisory services. I have been in the past few years, maybe 4 years at DUT, offering free services to Sunduzi municipality and also Capita on monitoring and evaluation, reviewing their project as they have reported them, and scrutinizing them, giving them free advice without any payment, while at the same time, the same municipality have issued so many tenders to people from Gauteng to fly down Durban and Pietermaritzburg to review the same issues and give them reports. So I think our role has been skewed because of our invitation from government. We don't get invitation. Here at Walter Sisulu, we have drafted an advisory board since we are transforming the curriculum. All the universities now, because governance, we are in a governance level, and as far as our scientific development of public administration, we want to acknowledge also, or to claim our African heritage within our governance structures and other issues of the curriculum that are topical we want to include. So we tried to organize the advisory bodies to get actually the feel of our public officials, especially local government, to assist us in identifying what do they need in this kind of actually crisis that we are. They don't pitch up, they don't show. And we're sending students for data collection so that they can get the feel of the gaps that are existing. For an example, I've got a PhD student who has completed a research now on water service quality, which is very important for Msunduzi municipality. It is a complete work. I'm sure he'll be matching very soon in the next graduation. It was so difficult to get actually involved because we wanted them at least to offer actually gate access for students to collect data so that they can read the same reports that can help them to identify the gaps.
Prof, you still there? Well, apologies for that glitch. I think you'll probably come back online. I think as she does that, we'll just move to you, Resuna.
Thanks.
Yes, I think you've heard the problems, and I've tried to strategically come to you post hearing the issue of, and of course you raised it, the issue of a lack of a vision, the question about our policy and the instruments such as DORA, and then to also bring it on the issue of education, because I always say people sometimes make government seem over there, forgetting we are part of it. And I think academia is part of it. So maybe just your retort to say, because I think you really did push it a bit to say, how then do we build this vision in a practical way for somebody who's in like my home municipality of Mfuleni, or somebody who's in Vembe, look, they have no desire to want to come to Joburg or Cape Town. They want to thrive where they were born. And I think Dr. Mohale says it quite rightly. Why can't investment come to them? So as Salgan, and I think as you as a practitioner in this field, how do we really start, because I want to say, how do we start thinking of solutions rather than lamentations? You're mute. There you go.
Yeah, thanks very much. I have, for the first time, experiencing a very erratic connectivity. My apology. I get disconnected and come back. I think you started earlier on with an argument that questions whether our constitution appropriately frames, or rather is a sufficient base for us to achieve democracy. I used to enjoy reading Noam Chomsky's on Force and Opinion, and I agree with him that democracy is not a bottomless pit. I think we overly democratize a number of things that actually make it for the state to direct development. And if we are still committed to achieving a developmental state, we probably may have to reconsider some of the choices that we've made. And so a trivial academic may argue that you had better development and a much better per capita household income in Iraq before the regime change. And yes, the argument was that there's no democracy there. So I agree with you. But at the same time, I don't think we should draw parallels between that and an environment which does not really offer democracy. Fundamentally, in my view, what is important is an emphasis on the quality of democracy. And to the extent that people enjoy such quality, people must have access to quality services. So it has to be unfair for somebody who stays somewhere in the rural areas of KZN, that the nature and the quality of roads that we provide in those villages actually determines the type of car those people may buy, even if they don't like it. So can we then say all South Africans enjoy the same quality of rights? That remains a big debate. I think there are quite a number of important issues that have been raised. And for me, I think we are still discussing the politics of local government, and how I wish we should spend more time on the business of local government. And if we were to spend more time on the business of local government, we would be looking at what's the acceptable average waiting time for somebody to get services of an ambulance, regardless of their actual location in terms of the Republic. What's the average waiting period if my house is engulfed with fire? So that's what we need to look at. Secondly, if we were to really spend more time looking at the business of local government, we probably will realize that the system is actually creating more problems for local government to achieve the business of local government. It cannot be that you would have a medium-sized municipality like Numa in the Eastern Cape, yet over 80% of that municipality's electricity is provided directly by Eskom, and yet we expect that municipality to generate revenue. So there's quite a number of issues that we need to look at. And so if you are in a rural municipality, you probably have less prospects of generating sufficient revenue. It becomes even worse post-COVID, where many of those people that are in various provinces throughout the country are now returning home unemployed. And so people or households will most likely be unable to afford payment of rates and services. And so those are fundamental questions for me. Now, if we were to talk about the business of local government as a primary priority instead of the politics of local government, we would understand that when a political party determines a mayor of Buffalo City, the first consideration would be, what is the actual value of the economy that mayor is likely to preside over? And therefore you deploy somebody who understands the complexity of that economy, the manufacturing aspect and all that. So party hierarchy then becomes a risk for the country, because Buffalo City has a GDP contribution to make to the overall GDP of the country. So the issue of at least ensuring that we spend less capacitating councillors, because at the time we must deploy councillors, we deploy appropriately skilled people. And that's the reality. And I don't think South Africa can still claim that we have less people that would be available to be councillors who are educated compared to those that we've had over the years. And most of the councillors that we have are quite young and ought to have sufficient, or the minimum levels of competencies that are required. So my view, we may need to consider that. The second issue that I would imagine Dr. Maswime would really step in there is how how do we continue in this space without finalizing the question that Professor Matsiliza was raising, dealing concretely with the powers and functions question. So the classification of roles. And so I'll give you one example. A rural municipality, in terms of the powers and functions, is responsible for access roads. And so the municipality invests in a yellow fleet, or you call it an earth-moving fleet, to fix access road in the municipality. And more often than not, that municipality, because it cannot access a particular access road in a certain village, finds itself having to fix a provincial road because the provincial government has failed to fix that road in order to be able to move its earth-moving equipment to an access road that they are supposed to fix. So those are the issues that we need to deal with. I don't think we must run away from addressing the question of provinces. I think it's a self-funding system. Eastern Cape gets almost maybe, let me say, more than 60 billion rands a year and spends less than 8 billion rands in terms of capital investment. And so the rest of that money finances the system. So we have created a system that is basically self-serving. So if you were to take those resources and that capacity to deploy in areas that would catalyze economic growth, we then will be in the correct way towards creating a developmental state. Why would you say you want to accelerate economic development, and then you locate provision of farming dams to a provincial government? And look, I agree with many people who would argue insofar as the land question is concerned. But the reality is that there's quite a number of villages that have sufficient parcels of land that if we were to deploy infrastructure, such areas will be in a position to catalyze economic growth through farming. So there are many issues. We have created a political system that is essentially constituted by people who used to be bold in terms of how we use available land parcels, even in areas where you're talking about land that historically ought to be in the hands of Black people, but is in the hands of white people. So if we're to use the land that we have appropriately, many of the challenges that we have or we are grappling with would have been solved, in my view, in terms of food security and in terms of some kind of economic activity. We have a case here in the Eastern Cape, in Ngoma municipality, where using land that is available, they've created a feedlot. I think they have a close to 3,000 rands, 2,000 heads of cattle that they're preparing for full commercial use. So with infrastructure, we can be able to activate the economy. What does it mean to the national and the provincial government that over the next 30 to 50 years, rainfall patterns are going to change? The Eastern Cape is likely going to be the wettest part of the country. What has been done? What is being done insofar as investment in infrastructure? So I'm just saying that perhaps we should start talking about the business of local government instead of the politics of local government. And that does not suggest that we should depoliticize local government. It is a political institution. Public servants are actually politicians, but on the applied side of politics. That's the reality. Unless Vets misled me when you taught me that public administration is applied politics, and I agree with that. And so that's one aspect for me. The second critical question for me is And I did look at the number of people who are in attendance here to be on the safe side. And I dare want to ask you, Dr. Puen, is can you make cooperative governance a line function? If you cooperative governance a line function, you will never achieve coherence of government. You will never achieve integrated development. You will never stabilize intergovernmental relations. And you will deepen what I call transformation fatigue. Because the increase in the number of Section 139 interventions is an indicator of that fatigue. The reality is that nobody seems to have an interest in terms of the capacity of provincial cocters to provide support that is required. Nobody is requiring any of the government departments to account in terms of their Section 154 contribution to provide support to local government. We continue to have a challenge where of agriculture would invest R1 million to Buffalo City. I'm just using an example for library services, and Buffalo City finds itself having to spend 10 million rands, and that is a power that is located at the provincial level. So there are systemic challenges that we have. Should we continue with the current long value chain in terms of provision of clean water? Why do we need water boards? Those are some of the questions that we should be talking about. And my personal opinion is that you probably need a slightly bigger district municipalities, only a provincial legislature, no provinces. And then you would have a more better focus in providing services and in investing in infrastructure that would catalyze economic growth. And that is my opinion for now. So without looking at those aspects, we most likely will come in a conversation next year, including the fact that where do we deploy most of our infrastructure investment resources? And to what extent does that catalyze economic growth? Because we're sitting on a time bomb, and that's the reality that we have. Thank you very much for now.
Thank you, Sonabo. And looking at the time, because one has to now wrap up, because time is very important, especially 4 o'clock equals 5 o'clock, and it's getting close to having to pick up little people. But I just we tried to get the prof back, but I think we struggled on that one. So what I will then do now, as one wraps up, is and I'm going to have to be very strict on this, hopefully less than a minute, to our guests, to say the one big game changer they would institute within rural and non-metropolitan municipalities. And can I ask that, please, less than a minute would really be appreciated. That one big game changer that would institute, if they had the power or if they're advising government, what would it be? And I'll start with Resonab.
That's a difficult one. That's a difficult one, honestly. For me, the game changer would be three critical components. One, we need to expose the invisible external hand on the affairs of municipalities. That's the game changer, and that's where the problem lies. The second one is we may need to really look at activating citizenry. I don't believe that it's possible for government to volunteer itself to be held accountable. So citizens must take up that responsibility. The third one is how I wish we would have more academics that are activists, so that they are more organic and relate to the real lived experiences of the people. Because in reality, they occupy the center of ongoing public discourses. And sometimes it generates discontents, regardless of the fact that I think most of the cases is really artificial and abstract. Thanks.
Thank you, Sonabo. Nice and short. We'll go to Maswime there in the Ferris Cape. We are one big game changer.
Thanks. I was going to say that the important thing is to really relook at the funding formula for local government so that it favors the less developed areas, but that will also need to go with a lot of support. But if anything, I have been compelled to agree with those that say maybe we don't really need provinces because all those skills, you can imagine if Mr. Bakura was the mayor of Mfuleni, what would have been happening there? all his MECs become MMCs, and I think would be speaking a very different Gauteng altogether. So I really support that the issue of powers and functions. I think is very important. But there's one last point that I should make as an engineer. I think there's still a case for separating infrastructure policies and legislation from general legislation. What do I mean by that? For example, with procurement, I think we should really start looking at infrastructure procurement versus general procurement from a legislative point of view, going all the way down to municipalities. I think that would save us a fortune. I think a lot of money is being lost there as well. Thanks, Dr. Boy.
Ramasumi, I think that's a big one, and I think we'll probably take that topic up. Dr. Mohale, if your big game changer idea.
I think Sonaba got it very well when he said that if we could pay particular attention to the injunction of Section 154 of the Constitution. The reading says the national and provincial government must support. It doesn't say they may, it says they must. For me, if we could get that understanding correct and make it mandatory, I suspect that was the intention when COGTA was, or the then DPLG was renamed COGTA in 2009. The intention was to position it as a cog in government that will coordinate such intervention as provided for by Section 154 of the Constitution. I think that we need to get there. Secondly, and importantly, I think this is where many of us would say that the money makes the world spin. We can plan for as long as we want. If we are not going to ensure that our funding is development-based or backlog-based, instead, as opposed to population as an index, and then we might as well forget. If you think Limpopo, Eastern Cape, and Mpumalanga, that's where, and Free State, that's where the money should be going, so that you also relieve the burden of overpopulation and migration from the cities. But if we do not invest money in these areas, quite frankly, the cities will continue to inherit the problems that should not be accruing. Lastly, and this is a difficult one, we can debate it for the next 2 hours. We may still not find consensus. I'm a firm believer on the statement by John Maxwell that everything rises and falls on leadership. Is that in every organization, you would need a leader that understands what they are doing. In the absence of effective, ethical, accountable leadership, even if we were to, we know the cases of the current cases of Eastern Cape, where Sonobo is, that there's a case of the money that went missing that was meant for memorial service. So as much as on one hand, we are calling for increased funding, it is also important to ensure that there are systems and processes that will ensure accountability of public funds. Otherwise, monies will continue to go missing, and then people will not receive what they should be receiving. And I hope partly that I've answered the point in the chat about deployment. As a matter of fact, I'm a supporter of cadre deployment, and I've argued that I do not think that in this country we have been practicing cadre deployment. I think we've been having a practice of deploying every Tom, Dick, and Harry, because at least the dictionary definition of the word cadre presupposes the existence of certain attributes, ability to do the work, competency, excellence. So if you take it from at least that word alone, let alone what the detail that Che Guevara goes in defining what a cadre is, I don't think that ANC has been practicing cadre deployment. Cadre deployment is working in China because you first position a party as to be developmental, and I don't think that ANC is. So the last point for me is a game changer. Make sure that every political party is developmental first before it can talk about the state being developmental. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mohale. He always says last point, and we know what he means. But thank you very much, Dr. Mohale, for that. And to everybody who was able to stay tuned, thank you ever so much. As I say in the chat, I'm sorry if we couldn't get to your question or comment, but I think issues needed to be aired out, and we'll make a concerted effort next time to ensure that they do. Again, also, please stay tuned. This is not the last of the discussions we're having. In fact, we're actually looking at, and I can maybe just give a heads up for the next discussion, we're looking at bringing in economists and financiers, and even people like Mr. Maswime, who are engineers, to actually discuss the business, as I like the way Resunabo puts it, the business, as in what would it actually take monetarily to get rural and non-metro municipalities to actually start working. So please do stay tuned for that. And also, I would also like to say goodbye to Oslerato. Many of you guys might not have seen her, but she's been pivotal in, along with Asalga, in putting this together. Oslerato is going on to another part of WITS. You see, it's always good to stay within WITS, Gundo. You should never leave us. And we'd just like to say, Oslerato, thank you so much for the great work you've done behind the scenes, putting people together. And we wish you all God's best as you go into a new avenue. And to everybody, please do keep safe. Stay tuned for other discussions like this. And yeah, I would say go vote. I'm not going to compel you. It's your choice. But please do play a part in making your area a better place to live in. Thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Resunabo. Thank you, Gundo. Thank you, Fikile. Thank you, Rato.